Hello, everyone. I am just figuring out the last kind of pieces on all of this. So bear with me. Let's see if we can get this. I think this is it. For those of you who are tuning into the recording, this is me thinking I had it figured out. So, welcome everyone. We're going to give it just a few minutes. I am so excited to be here with you. And I just realized that I scheduled this for the wrong date, which of course makes it a little bit harder for people to join. So, we are going to get this scheduled. All right. All right. I am hoping that this is working. We will see. This is kind of new territory for me. I've done live streams before, but it's always been on Facebook, not this double venture where it's YouTube streaming into Patreon. So I will figure it out. And if for some reason this is not going live, then I am super sorry. I will get it figured out before next April. The next live stream, which will be in April. Hi, everyone. I'm Pernille Rip, and I am coming to you live from my house here in Madison, Wisconsin. And I am so excited that you are here with me. I got your questions, and of course, I've got some book recommendations, etc. And so we're just going to jump right in and get started with that very first question, which I feel like was such a good one, because it's definitely something when I think about my own classroom. So for those of you who don't know, I teach seventh grade here in a school district called Oregon School District, right outside of Madison, here in Wisconsin, and I've been there for 8 years. Before that, I was an elementary teacher, fourth and fifth grade. So one of the questions that came through in our Patreon community was just like, how do you help students who respond to things such as reading about people or gender in a disrespectful or immature way? How do we kind of create that understanding of how do we express our opinions in order to ask the questions without harming other people and also not causing harm in general. And that has happened to me as well. So I'm going to give you a book recommendation that really kind of centered my work. And it's this one, and I talk about it all the time, Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom by Matt Kay. It's a really fantastic professional development book. But what I have really loved, and there's so much to love about it, but one thing that I have absolutely loved about this book is his first discussion about setting up your classroom space to be a safe space, and how often we as teachers just kind of declare our classroom as a safe space, and then assume that kids know what that means, and also assume that it's going to be a safe space. And so in reading that book, that really made me kind of stop and pause as far as thinking about how do I build classroom community, particularly now where I feel like more than ever, it's okay. There's this notion that it's okay to say whatever you want, and it's okay to say things such as, I don't believe in LGBTQ people, or like making fun or just being really harmful or laughing about things that are are connected to someone's identity. And so knowing this and knowing that this was even happening in my community, and there just was a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation, but also wanting to make sure that all kids felt valued in our space, no matter their opinions, I very purposefully selected the first couple read alouds that I started the year with. And this really set the tone. And so I'm not saying you have to wait an entire year to set the tone like this, but I think it kind of talks about how we set the tone for, like, how do we discuss and how do we ask questions that may seem harmful. And so the very first book that we started with this year was on the Day You Begin by Jackie Woodson. And we started talking about our own identities and what we held really close to us. Like, what are the things that really stop us, that we hold tight in our heart. And then I used a fantastic idea, and of course I'm super blanking on the name right now, but it's the 5-word identity. And I will definitely, I'll put it in the comments so you can see the original post, because this guy is so amazing. But he had shared this idea of having kids write down 5 words that they really feel talk about their identity. And then once they wrote down their 5 words, talking about it with other people, and then jumping in, and then like crossing out one, so like the least important out of the 5. And of course kids got really like, it's Tom Rademacher, there we go, it just came to me, Tom Rademacher, but I'll link it in the comments. um, um, Kids were very like, oh, what do you mean? I can't cross that out. And then do that again until they came down to just one word that they felt was a really big part of who they were. They then decorated it and it hangs outside of our classroom. And it was super, super interesting to me to see what kids put down as that one part of their identity, whether it was athlete or artist or brother. I put down mom. Some kids put male, just I had a kid that said asexual. We had all sorts of different things. And we kind of left the identity talk there. We just talked about like how important it is for this space to be a space where all identities are welcome, and also where we get to um, learn about each other and learn about identities that may be outside of our own experience. The next day, I then very purposefully used the picture book, What Are Your Words? And while the book is centered around identity, it also brings in the concept of pronouns. And I knew that for some of my students, that would lead to questions, and their opinions would probably come out. And I'll flat out admit I was kind of nervous about using the book. And so I really, and just because um, in this day and age that we quickly get anger rather than understanding, and I wanted to make sure that people understood why I was using this book. And so this is not me just being a crazy person. Like, this is work that we do within our district. And so we read the book aloud, but what I love so much about the book is that it doesn't just talk about someone's pronouns, it talks about like all sorts of different identities. And so we tied it in with like, all right, now that we've thought more about our identities, are there identities that you kind of forgot about yesterday that you feel are important for other people to know? And what are your pronouns? And on the very first day, I had introduced myself with my pronouns as well. And I just kind of left it at that. I explained to kids, like, these are my pronouns. This is what it is grammatically, so that they know what they mean. And then and then I had them fill in just a piece of paper, and it was like, your name, do you have a nickname that you'd like me to call you? If you have pronouns that you would like me to know, you can do that, but it's really up to you. And so they turned that in, and that really laid the foundation, because right away in that read aloud, I had kids that were like, I don't get it. How can you have different pronouns? How can't you just know that you're a boy or a girl? And so by kind of purposefully inviting that conversation in, we stopped the read aloud and we talked about some of those things. And I believe that it's okay for us to share our opinions. And the way that I do it is by saying, this is my opinion. Does not make it the right way to think. I encourage you to come up with your own opinions, but this is my opinion. And so, and there were definitely questions where I was like, that's not like an appropriate question, where it was getting more like into like sexual organs and stuff like that, where I was like, that would be a great question to ask at home. So also knowing kind of where your boundaries are. But in having that conversation, I think it signaled to kids of all sorts of identities and opinions that we could have this conversation and they could ask their questions. I did stress that it has to be respectful, and that you don't get to disparage other people's identities, no matter where you fall. And so when kids, for example, will say, well, like, I don't believe in trans people, I will often counter with that it's not a belief. It's not about you believing in them. It's about whether or not you support trans people, because this isn't, this isn't Santa. This isn't something that we can believe in, or the Easter bunny, right? Like, these are people's identities. So it's really not for you to decide whether you believe in them. It's up to you to decide whether you support them in them. I'm also very open that I am the parent of a child within the LGBTQ community, for example, and that there are hard lines that they don't get to cross when it comes to asking questions and when it comes to how they talk about other human beings. And I think that that has also been fundamental in the community that we create, that it's really important for me that kids can absolutely ask questions, but when it kind of starts to slip into the, now they're just kind of ridiculing and they're kind of gearing up, that's where there's a hard stop, because that's not discussing for understanding, that's discussing to put down, or it's like a fake discussion. So this is work that we've been doing all year, and that also means that I have been very open, knowing that anytime I book talk a book, for example, about, I don't know, LGBTQ seems to be the big trigger right now for my community. Anytime I book talk of that, I'm open to their questions. But I also continue to encourage my kids to make their own opinions and to read literature that centers in the experiences of LGBTQ people. And so it has absolutely been interesting to see kids continue to ask questions, but also recognizing that there are boundaries and that there are ways for them to access the information that they want. I think it's also been really important for kids to know that there are those hard boundaries, and that for this to be a safe learning community, there are things that we don't say and there are things that we don't express. And so I don't know if that gives you some kind of ideas. I will say it's all year work. And every time I feel like I have made progress, something happens and I'm like, okay, maybe we didn't make as much progress as far as just building understanding and tolerance. But I've also kind of said to kids, it's not really up to you to understand, it's up to you to accept. And one of the big things that I've talked to my students about too, in particular, I will just ask them, like, how does that person's identity impact you? Like, does it matter in your sphere of influence? And that's been a good way to also get kids to think about, why am I reacting in the way that I am? So I fully believe in the idea of, like, calling in, opening up discussion, making sure that every kid feels safe in whatever they believe, and also that they feel safe in asking whatever questions they may have. Um, and so that is one way that I've been doing that work. And so that work is also, propped up by the explorations that we do, by the book talks that I do, by the mentor texts that I use, and that idea of, like, how are we conversation based? And so for me too, it's about creating a normalcy of many different identities, making sure that all sorts of identities get to hold power and be a hero. And I think that that has been really important. So my first book recommendation is this book, Not Light But Fire, by Matt Kay. It is so powerful. And I would say also centered with that for book recommendations, because of course I have book recommendations, is Alex's book here, Equity Centered Trauma Informed Education. I read this over the summer and highlighted, as you can see, lots of different highlights and tabs. And I love her quote here: if you ask someone to disclose something, you are making a commitment to act on it. But this really just, like, completely just found, or just like refounded, because this is what I've been believing in for so many years, about that idea of creating spaces where everything is just radical love. Like, I'm going to love you no matter where you're at in your journey in life and what questions you have. And I'm going to do everything that I can to create a safe space for you while also protecting the identities of others. And so I highly recommend that book. And then this one as well, Kate Murphy's You're Not Listening, What You're Missing and Why It Matters, was really powerful for me, about just, like, how we listen to others, how do we generate communities that listen, and how do we use that in our work. So if you know anything about my work, so much of my work is based around listening and talking and discovering our identity, etc. And so this has been really, really important for me as well. And so those are kind of three PD books that I continue to come back to, and that I continue to just like it continues to settle me in as far as the work that I do with students. So but I think like also thinking about, just like what are the experiences that kids are allowed to experience, right? Like whose lives do they get to learn about? Whose lives do we uphold as they have value? I think is so important. And how do I go about and model that work within my own interactions with kids, and recognizing that people are on different journeys. I think that's been the biggest thing for me, that in a country that is so divided again, which is not the first time in our history, how do I continue the dialogue? So rather than widening the divide, we can start to see each other as human beings and start to like have more meaningful dialogue. That's been really important to me. So yeah, so so what are some de-escalation techniques for the stress that we feel, or kids feel, as like spring testing starts up and also the end of the year and kids are just kind of over it? That was another question that came up. And I think that all ties in with everything we do here. So I really take a long, hard look at um, what we're doing, like what kind of fun are we having? Are we joking around? How's my stress? Like that's probably the first place. I know how much I impact the kids. So much so, right? So if I'm stressed, burnt out, tired, over it, that's the vibe that's going to be in my classroom. And that's been hard. Like this year, I've been very brutally honest, has been harder than any year that I've ever taught. And I can't quite put my finger on it. It's not the kids. The kids have been amazing in our space, but it's like everything that surrounds it. And so for me, I really had to sit down and be like, okay, what are we doing? And what are our core values of what our experience is going to be like? And so for me, that was lots of talk, movement, and like partnership and working with kids and having like some fun with it. And so when you sit down, and I know I shared my unit plans in our community, in our Patreon community, and I'm going to be updating them because of course they're getting updated, because that's how teaching works. You sit down over the summer and come up with a fictitious year, and then you meet the actual kids. um, I've been having a lot of discussions with my students about like, what would you like to see happen? What would make our classroom better? And that's ongoing, but really ramping it up right now and offering them different options and solutions. So for example, we were going to do a narrative nonfiction book club unit right after we finished our testing. Our testing's in 2 weeks. And I brought up to the kids, I said, here's what I'm thinking. I'm having a little bit of hesitation, and I kind of wanted to act on that gut feeling. And so I brought it up to them and I said, here's what I'm thinking. What are your ideas? And right away, my community was like, please don't make us do that. And I was like, wait a minute, like my job is to challenge you. I feel like this would be challenging. But they brought up so many great points as to why they would like to just take a step back, why they would like to, instead of doing narrative nonfiction and inquiry, which they've done a ton of in our class and in geography, they just really wanted fiction experiences. And so the other book club choice that we had was overcoming obstacles. Gives them a lot more choice in books. What they're discussing is more, character development and power structure and all of those things. And they were like, is it okay that we get to be challenged through the text rather than the learning target? Is it okay that we can just sit in our community and we can read really incredible books and share in that experience? And it was so valid for me to hear where they were feeling their stress level. And I think that's what part of what creates success in our community. But we also do goofy stuff, right? I think like I was just talking to my husband. So my husband is a brand new teacher this year. He's a tech ed teacher, 6, 7, 8, at a school here in Madison. And he teaches 150 students every quarter. So every quarter his kids change, which is just a crazy situation, but he's amazing. And he was just talking about how kids were kind of burnt out. I'm just really over what they were doing. And I was like, have you done a game day? Like, have you taken a moment to just be like, let's just have some fun together? I think because in his seriousness of first year teaching, he's very like, I got to make sure all the curriculum is covered. I got to make sure all the content is being covered. I got to make sure they've learned as much as they possibly can, which of course, that is that is one of our number one things for teaching. But we also need to make sure that they want to come into our space and be there. And so we just had a movie day on Friday. It was the day before spring break. And sure, I could have done content. We could have done lots of stuff. But I also said to the kids, let's celebrate that we got done with another quarter. You did amazing, beautiful things, and that was what we did. We did how-to speeches. It's this mini project that I just threw into Patreon as well to show you my lesson plans for. But 2 days of watching kids, almost like a show and tell, right? Teaching us all sorts of stuff. I laughed so hard. I had so many great speeches. Kids got to see so many different sides of each other. So I think like that's part of how I like de-escalate that stress, and just like really keeping a pulse on what could they use. Can we go outside? What kind of conversations can we have? Can I play a funny video? Like everything just matters. And then I think at the end of the day too, when they leave the class, I tell them, thank you for coming today. Like, be good human beings. Like, let me know if you need anything. And I think that like that praise is also really, really important. um so the last question centered around writing instruction, and I'll probably dedicate an entire kind of like Patreon live stream for this because there's so much to it. But one of the things that we have really worked on is choice in writing. And so we are going to be doing a creative writing project right after our book clubs, I want to say. So we do a lot of like reading centered for a couple weeks, then writing centered, then reading centered, then writing centered. So 3 week like explorations. 3 weeks is kind of the max for my students, and then they're definitely tapped out. And so what we keep coming back to when we kind of do that balance between choice and format and structure is that we take a look at the standards that are attached to it. So, for example, for my creative writing unit, I know that they need to work on word choice, they need to work on organization and structure, as well as like spelling and punctuation and capitalization and all of that. And so knowing that that's what the standard says actually offers up a lot of different ways for me to incorporate choice, because it doesn't say write a story, like it says create a narrative, real or fictional. And so when I think about that, that gives us a lot of opportunity for choice. And so, for example, instead of just writing a story, they can do a YouTube script. They can do graphic illustrative stories. They can do choose your own adventure. They can do free verse, which I had kids do earlier in the year, and it was brilliant, amazing. But it also means that their topics can really widen. I have also started just telling kids, you can lie, like when you're using your own life, and if that's what you want to do, you're allowed to embellish and make stuff up. um, but honestly, opening it up to just fiction in general has been huge for my students. They had so many creative stories instead of going, it has to be a story from your life. My seventh graders, rightfully so, were kind of like, I don't want to write about my life. Like, my life is boring. And I think like they can only hear adults say so many times, like, oh no, your stories are great, but then not get like the assessments and the feedback that they're looking for to really believe us. So I've told kids, like, you could absolutely use your own stories, or you can just sit down and make up something. Or if you want to write about your camping trip, maybe something more exciting happened than what really happened. But I also start to think about choice in different ways. So choice can also play into who are you writing with? I have moved away a long time ago from forced peer groups, because that to me just was really made my students feel really vulnerable. So when we think about writing, one of the things that I think about is that it's so personal, right? And we can feel really violated when someone who doesn't see us doesn't like respect our writing. And I think we do that to kids a lot. Like, we just expect them to share, or we put it up in the hallway, or we even like edit the kid right out of it when we sit down and we confer with them. So choice in writing for me isn't just in what they're writing, but in how they're writing. So like, who are they writing with? And I always tell my kids, you should have a writing buddy or a writing peer group. And then of course, if there are new kids or kids who are not super connected to the community, then I figure that out. And sometimes they choose me and I'm their writing peer, and that's okay. Where are you writing in the room? How are you writing? Are you typing? Are you handwriting? I have a couple kids that prefer handwriting for everything, and then they just type their final best draft or their best draft and give that to me. When are you ready for feedback? How do you want this to be assessed? And also, like, what is the goal that you're working on? And I think for me, that's been really huge so that kids can take ownership over, like, if they know we're diving into a narrative story, what is it you want to get better at? So that I can look at the lessons that I need to give to the class. We do a lot of very, very short lessons, but then it's also a lot of one on one conferring. And I'll say that for some reason, sorry, I'm still having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to figure this out. I promise for next April. I'm so, so, so sorry. Um, I will say that for my kids too, it's been really important for them to embrace the change that they need within their space. That they need to be able to sit down and look at their writing and go, how is it I want to grow? Because too many of my students, they are like, well, whatever you want me to grow on, and that's not taking ownership over their own lives as writers. And so for me, that's where that balance between choice and structure and format and all of those things come in, that it's really, really, really like important that even if it's like I have to have you write an essay, which sometimes happens right in a year, then it can also be sorry, technical differences or difficulties. So strange. Okay. Oh, I see what it is. I found my problem. Oh, Patreon, for some reason, decided to schedule it for tomorrow. Really likes that March 21st date. Let's take a look at that. Oh my goodness. This is just a mess. I will figure it out, and maybe I'll throw one together for next week just to make up for it, since it's such a mess. It won't let me change it for some reason. Okay. We'll figure it out. Anyway, now I of course lost my train of thought. When the format is chosen for them, you have to write a poem. Then I try to give choice in other ways. Again, who are they writing with? How are they sharing? How's it being assessed? How are they actually doing the writing? Where are they writing in the room? All of that. And so I think the kids also see that play between, oh, okay, there is some choice, but there's also some structure that she needs to fill me in, and that's been really huge. But like I said, I'll probably do a live stream just on like writing instruction in general, because that's something I definitely think a lot about and play with. So I want to be mindful of time, and clearly, all my technical difficulties here aside, like, I swear this will be better. Usually, I know how to do these things. For some reason, it keeps scheduling it rather than letting me just post it. So I'll figure it out and I'll get it loaded up. I wanted to just leave you with a few book recommendations, because obviously that is like the center of the work that I do. And so if you are looking for a new middle grade fantasy, I highly recommend Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms by Jamar J. Perry. It's the first book in a new series, and it is so fantastic. Here's what it's about. Cameron Battle grew up reading the Book of Chidani, cherishing stories about the fabled kingdom that cut itself off from the rest of the world to save the Igbo people from danger. Passed down over generations, the book is Cameron's only connection to his parents, who disappeared one fateful night 2 years ago. Ever since, his grandmother has kept the book locked away, but it calls to Cameron. When he and his best friends Zion and Aliyah decide to open it again, they are magically transported to Chidani. Instead of a land of beauty and wonder, they find a kingdom in extreme danger as the queen's sister seeks to destroy the barrier between worlds. The people of Chidani have been waiting for the last descendant to return and save them. Is Cameron ready to be the hero they need? So incredible. I really loved it, especially for kids who just love like Rick Riordan and Lightning Thief. And so this one, highly recommend. My first spring break read was this one, Worser by Jennifer Sigler, just came out on Tuesday. It's incredible. Middle grade, realistic fiction. And what I loved about it in particular was the main character, because I don't feel like book or kids who are kind of like slightly awkward, stuck in their ways, kind of I don't know, nerdy kids get like a lot of action in stories without them changing significantly. And so I loved how the character was embraced here. So here's what it's about. It's really fantastic. A lover of logic, words, and grammar, 12-year-old William Wyatt Orser acquired the annoyingly ungrammatical nickname Worser so long ago that few people at school know to call him anything else. Nor do they know about his masterwork, an epic lexicon of words he's carefully collected over the years. When his widowed mother suffers a when his widowed mother suffers a debilitating stroke that leaves her unable to speak, Worcer's world is completely upended. His aunt moves in along with her cats, art projects, loud music, and bright clothes, and home is not the refuge it once was. Feeling lost, lonely, and overwhelmed, Worcer searches for a new sanctuary, just as the literary club run by his favorite classmate, Danya Curry, needs a place as well. Worcer finds a used bookstore that opens its doors to all of them, and he discovers, much to his surprise, that the key to making friends is for him to open up too. Gradually, he finds himself sharing his thoughts, feelings, and sense of humor, and even his treasured masterwork. But when change threatens his new refuge, Worcer's grief and frustration lead him to react in an extreme and destructive way, and he must make peace with the fact that nothing stays the same forever. In the end, it is up to Worcer to turn the page on his own story. This would be a great read aloud as well. And then a couple of picture books. Oh, I Instagrammed this one yesterday too because I read it aloud to my own kids. I love this new book, Mama and Mommy and Me in the Middle by Nina LaCour. This is her first picture book, but she's been writing a lot of young adult and adult stuff. And then the illustrator is Kalani Juanita, who also illustrated When Aiden Becomes a Brother and Magnificent, Homespun Brown, and other favorites. So this is just a really great everyday story of missing and of family and of love. When mommy goes on a vacation, or not vacation, work trip for a week, how does the family still function without her? And how does it feel to have big emotions knowing that you're missing your family? So highly recommend this one. Then I'm always looking for great examples of narrative nonfiction because my students write narrative nonfiction. This one was incredible. I read this one aloud to my own kids last night. And then, of course, we sat on YouTube and actually watched videos of anglerfish. This is so cool. So it's nonfiction, but it's narrative. So it follows the story of anglerfish, which is pictured here. But it gives us all of these amazing facts about anglerfish, which are just like the weirdest looking fish. The illustrations are absolutely incredible. And I just love this cover, how it's going to draw in kids. And then I love this Show the World, just about, looking at the world through this idea of a camera lens, journeying through your neighborhood, exploring all the ways that you can express yourself. I would love to use this as a mentor text for kids of like, what's in your neighborhood, like having them draw out or even giving them ways to like take pictures and show your journey. So I am super sorry about all the technical difficulties because I now know what I did wrong and I will take care of it, I promise. So I will go into our community and double check and see if I should just reschedule a live stream with new questions, but I will put this recording out for everyone. I promise I will figure it out. Thank you so much for believing in this community and being a part of my journey. If I didn't answer your questions, just shoot me a message. I'm here to collaborate. Or if you have other questions as well, I'm here to share. I'm here to help you grow. And hopefully together we can kind of navigate this year and find grace within each other. Take care, everyone, and let me know how I can help.